Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. I'm about to start the show, and I want to give you your daily tasking for Thursday, July 9th, 2020. First of all, I want you to go out and do something that makes you happy today. I don't care if chewing gum of a certain kind makes you happy. Do that today. Make sure you get some sun in your face, and remember that you're alive and God loves you. Now, with all that being said, I want you to go out and tell all your friends about this show. Facebook, if that's your only friends, well, you live a sad life, but at least you have some friends, all right? So tell all of them about it. Twitter, Instagram, whatever your social media thing is. Now, me, I only have like 3 people that I contact on a regular basis, but maybe you have 10 or 15. Tell them all about the show. Get the word out, and yourself subscribe and download it so those numbers go up as well. Trust me, the more this grows, the more we can get the truth out to the nation. And isn't that what we have to do? That's your tasking. Now let's start the show. This is Jonathan Gilliam back on a Thursday for the experts. The truth has arrived. And as you can see, for some reason I'm having fun with this today. I'm in a good mood, but I'm not going to lie to you. I'm feeling, I vowed when I first got into media and I started doing these podcasts. First, it was a video cast, and when I was hosting, all these shows, I always vowed not to be the person who repeats they have their shtick, where they repeat the same thing over and over again. My favorite has always been, when it comes to media, was Glenn Beck when he had his show on Fox News, and Bill O'Reilly on Fox News. Those were, I think, 2 of the best media shows that have ever been. And then Mark Levin's radio show. Those are my 3 big ones, right? Now, Glenn Beck's changed a lot, and that flavor of that show that he had before on Fox News is kind of gone. And, of course, Bill O'Reilly is no longer on TV. He has his own podcast, and Mark Levin is still on radio. But those, when I used to watch those, I used to say, you know what? That's what I want. That's what I want. I want to be able to bring something that engages people. And also, not really with Glenn, but with Bill O'Reilly and Mark Levin, those guys have real experience. They, had real jobs and real careers. And Glenn, not saying Glenn Beck didn't. I mean, Glenn Beck is definitely a powerhouse, but the secret behind Glenn is his research. He has incredible researchers, and I don't know where he figured that out, but I talked to one of his researchers years ago. I had my little Glenn Beck story that I told on here before, and I talked to one of his researchers, or several, it was actually a couple of them, but they all said, they were young college students, and they were liberal, and then when they got onto his show to do research, their minds were blown at what they were seeing. And I thought that was very, very incredible talking to them. This was back, when was this? 2010, 2011, sometime around there. But I vowed to not have the show that, like you see now, it's the same show every day. They repeat over and over. They have their shtick, especially if it's CNN or MSNBC. And there's other people out there that have their shows, and, it's just the same show every day. And I didn't want to do that. But it seems like this news cycle, as much as it seems is going on, the reality is every day, for me, it's the same problem. And it's a problem that I've been screaming about for, as I keep saying on the show every day. It's communism, globalism, Marxism. Now I see Marxism is starting to make a huge comeback in media. Now, also, let me just finish that. Progressive, progressive Democrats, socialists, all the same thing. Okay. Fascists, dictators. It's all the same thing. Ultimately, it comes down to, it doesn't matter if it's one or if it's, 10 people that are controlling you in every aspect of your life. It doesn't really matter what you call it or how many people are doing it. It always comes down to the same, and that is absolute power and control over people, and where they dissolve the rights of the human, whatever humans are under them. They dissolve those rights, and then it becomes this elitist thing, and that's kind of the way it's been throughout history. But I've been seeing this more and more, that it's becoming more mainstream, and it's really the only thing that really matters right now. So it's kind of difficult for me to go through here. But what I was saying about Marxism is nobody would talk about that. For the longest time, they wouldn't talk about that. And now, not only am I seeing liberals saying communism and Marxism is different, and they're more communist than they are Marxist, that it's a different aspect of communism. That word Marxism is coming on over and over again, because I went through all the news. I stay up all night. Tonight, well, actually the past 2 nights, I think I told you I got this Oculus Quest, which is a virtual reality headset. And it's kind of cool because it's a standalone headset. You don't need a computer. And so I can go on there and surf the internet on that thing. And I can sit back on my couch, and it looks like I'm in this dark room with this gigantic television screen in front of me. It's a very dude thing, I think, to do. But I would sit there, or I have been sitting there, and instead of doing my research on the computer in front of me, I just do my research on there. And it's pretty easy. I mean, it actually works quite well. And I can scroll through the stories, and I keep seeing this word Marxism pop up all of a sudden. Some people are calling themselves Marxists. They're talking about Marxism. Other people are saying that they're more communist than Marxism. But nonetheless, it's one of these words that come up more and more. Now, with all that being said, today there was a lot of sound bites that I could pull from. And some of them aren't even worth going into. Don Lemon, for instance, I am going to play part of what he said. I think I told you yesterday or the day before about how Terry Crews had been on his show, and I just love that guy, man. He's a perfect example that color doesn't matter, and somebody who realizes that and doesn't get stuck with that chip on their shoulder. They can achieve amazing things regardless of what anybody else says or does around him. And I think Terry Crews is a role model, not just for black people, but for people in general. He's a success. And anyway, Don Lemon was trying to hammer him for saying that, he didn't like the way or what Black Lives Matter stood for. And so what's interesting is there's another video that surfaced from, I don't know, it's like 7 years ago. And it is of all, surprise, surprise, Don Lemon. And he's talking about, let me pull it up here if I can get it. He's talking about, he actually had a clip from Bill O'Reilly. And let me pull it up here real quick just so I can explain it while it's actually, okay, so here we go. I got the soundbite up. And remember, the soundbite from, that he had the other day when he was trying to crush Terry Crews, it's unbelievable because it's absolutely opposite of everything that you would have heard Don Lemon say on TV for the past 2 or 3 years, really. Now listen to this. This is from like 7 years ago. And this is Don Lemon, the same Don Lemon that says the most racist, ridiculously stupid, judgmental stuff every night on CNN. So bad that it is like you combined all the idiots on The View and put it on testosterone and fed it raw meat of stupidity for a month, and that Don Lemon is that bad. But listen what he had to say 7 years ago.
It's time now for some tough love on the subject. The reason there is so much violence and chaos in the black precincts is the disintegration of the African American family.
Now he's playing, remember, it gets a little complicated here. I'm playing a clip of Don Lemon from 7 years ago. And on his show, he plays this clip of Bill O'Reilly. Now, you would think in today's world, Don Lemon would be falling over backwards in his chair, freaking out like he does over something a white guy would say on Fox News. But listen.
He's got a point. In fact, he's got more than a point. Bill?
Raised without much structure, young black men often reject education and gravitate towards the street culture, drugs, hustling, gangs. Nobody forces them to do that. Again, it is a personal decision.
He is right about that too. But in my estimation, he doesn't go far enough. Because black people, if you really want to fix the problem, here's just 5 things that you should think about doing.
Okay. I want you to prepare yourself. If you're standing up, you better sit down because this is going to knock you over. All right. Here's Don Lemon's 5 things that he thinks black people should do. And this is again from 7 years ago.
Number 5, pull up your pants. Number 4 now is the N-word. Now number 3, respect where you live. Start small by not dropping trash, littering in your own communities. I've lived in several predominantly white neighborhoods in my life. I rarely, if ever, witness people littering. I live in Harlem now. It's an historically black neighborhood. Every single day I see adults and children dropping their trash on the ground when a garbage can is just feet away. Just being honest here. Number 2, finish school. You want to break the cycle of poverty? Stop telling kids they're acting white because they go to school or they speak proper English. Over the course of a career, a college grad will make nearly $1 million more than a high school graduate. That's a lot of money. And number 1, and probably the most important, just because you can have a baby, it doesn't mean you should, especially without planning for one or getting married first. More than 72% of children in the African American community are born out of wedlock. That means absent fathers. And the studies show that lack of a male role model is an express train right to prison. And the cycle continues. So please, black folks, pay close attention to the hip hop and rap culture that glorifies everything I just mentioned. Thug and reprehensible behavior. A culture that is making a lot of people rich, just not you.
I mean, I'm shocked. Listen, I've listened to that a couple of times now. Unbelievable. And Don Lemon, well, to whatever year this was, 7 years ago, Don Lemon is absolutely right. He was absolutely correct in everything that he said, which makes me wonder what the heck happened to Don Lemon. Is he a stooge for the leftists now? Does somebody have something over him or is he just that brainwashed? What happened? Did he become, I've met him a couple times. He's kind of a narcissist. So did he all of a sudden, did the lie that he tells himself that he's great, did he just become absolutely consumed with himself to the point where he is this creature that he is now? I don't know. But he should listen to this, and then he should have a stiff drink and sit down and cry, because what he said is something I can get behind and respect. And I would think that the majority of people in this country could. Nothing that he pointed out there is a lie, and none of it requires millions of dollars. It doesn't. You can go, look, I was poor as you can be with my grades that weren't that great when I got out of high school, but I still managed to get myself to college and to graduate with a double major. If I can do that, anybody can do that. It doesn't matter if you're white or black. In fact, if you are black, you have a better chance right now in the world that we live in. You have a better chance at getting assistance to go to college than I do if I wanted to go, being a white guy. Man, and I've changed. I mean, up until, 2 months ago, or whenever this stuff started a month ago, I didn't like to mention the colors of people's skin. Hated it when I was on the radio. But now, I was on Wilcow yesterday. I'm actually going to be on Breitbart here in about, by the time you listen to this, it'll be about time for me to be on Breitbart this morning. But I was on Will Cow Majority yesterday, and it was funny because I told him, I said, hey, Andrew, the last time we talked, people were not being judged by the color of their skin to the point where you had to identify people as a black person or white person. But that's all changed now. Also, the last time I talked to Will Cow, communism had not taken over. And it has. I don't know if you realize that, but it has. A good example is the cancel culture, which I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. But this soundbite with Don Lemon shows you the extent of which we've gone down the wrong road in this country, and how it's a perfect example of when people get indoctrinated. I don't know what happened to Don, but he said his narrative now is the exact narrative that everybody on the left follows. There's no critical thinking. There's no individual thinking. It is collective thinking. That's it. Not a collection. Remember, when I say a collection, that's where you take different kinds of thinkers and critical thinkers and people that need a little help thinking, and you get a collection together. And I always like to say a collection of free people, and they can work together. You get a collective, and there's only one thought. There's only one ideology. There's only one way of doing things. And if you don't do it, you're not in the collective. So you can do and think however you want and still be a part of the collection of free thinkers. And when you look at high schoolers and young people in college, they are part of the collective, and they have been brainwashed. They have been indoctrinated and then brainwashed. But you can see that it permeates them so bad, this leftist ideology, that they cannot stop and think about what you're saying. And what's fascinating about Don Lemon is that he did think clearly. I mean, I'm assuming somebody else didn't write this one. That probably shouldn't assume that, but it seemed like it was coming from him, his heart. And if that's the case, even if he was arrogant and, lefty back then, he still saw this reality. And when I watched the interview with Terry Crews the other night, that was totally opposite. It was everything Don Lemon was saying was this narrative, this collective narrative. And I can't help, and Terry Crews was the opposite. He was more like the Don Lemon from 7 years ago. And I can't help but think that somehow, some way, he was indoctrinated or brainwashed. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, I've told the story on here before where I've talked to people who have gone up on stage with these hypnotist comedians, and they literally got hypnotized in, 30 seconds and had difficulty opening their eyes, I think it was. And it can happen. What if that's happened on a grand scale? Consider that. Consider this, okay? What if somewhere along the line with the leftist CIA, and I know this sounds tinfoil hat, but give me a second, think about it. And the way that TV and Silicon Valley and social media have all come about, and the way that it's become, used to be like in high school before, cell phones and things, if you were popular, and this is what popular people don't realize, I was not necessarily a popular person. So, but what I could see is that in order to be popular, you had to be a part of the collective. You couldn't just be an individual and expect to be popular in high school. Well, through TV and the internet and then social media, the definition of that narrative and how you had to be became more and more divisive, where it's not just that you have to be or say this, but everybody else around you are complete fools, weirdos. And what's even more strange is the people that were weirdos in school are now the people that are setting the standards for what the narrative actually is. So is it possible that there was some kind of hypnotic thing that was happening in television and social media? I mean, stranger things have happened where people don't think for themselves anymore. I have very little possibilities of explaining the behavior that you see in people on the left. to where they just simply cannot not hate Trump. And they cannot think outside of whatever this narrative is. If somebody's left and they come on my page, I know exactly what they're going to say. You don't have to try to predict it at all. It's going to be right there. It's the same thing that everybody else is saying. I can go and go to CNN.com or the Drudge Report or MSNBC, and I can listen to the liberal politicians, and whatever they're saying, I can expect it from people that are on the left. Their opinions are going to be exactly the same. Now, it's not that way with true conservatives. And again, I'm not talking about Republicans when I say conservatives. I'm talking about people who are free thinkers, who are critical thinkers, who are slow to change, and don't feel it necessary to make people live the way that they live. So this is very interesting watching this when you consider, what Don Lemon was saying here and what he was saying with Terry Crews the other night. So I'm going to play part of what Don Lemon was saying the other night with Terry Crews, and I want you to compare and contrast that. This is from his show.
Please listen to this segment because actor and activist.
Now, this is from recently. This is from just the other night. What day was this? The 7th. So it was 2 nights ago. Now, listen to what Don Lemon has to say.
Terry Crews facing backlash for tweeting, "We must ensure Black Lives Matter doesn't morph into Black Lives Better." Here's how he explained it. Are all white people bad? No. Are all black people good? No. Knowing this reality, I stand on my decision to unite with good people, no matter the race, creed, or ideology. Given the number of threats against this decision, I also decide to die on this hill. Terry Crews joins me now.
Now, again, if you're not seeing Don Lemon's face right now, I'm watching it. That's why I suggest you look up these two videos, and you'll see the snarkiness in Don Lemon's face. This is exactly what he was saying 7 years ago, what Terry Crews is about to say. But as you'll see, there's a complete difference in the way that Don Lemon looks at life now. And well, just listen to it. It's very odd.
Terry, man, you stepped in it. You say that you're willing You say you're willing to die on this hill. You've taken a lot of heat for this. Explain what you were thinking and why it's so important that you.
Now, why did he think that that's like he's insulting Terry Crews when he says that? He's insulting him and saying, man, you really stepped in it. Because Terry Crews is getting death threats and people are coming at him for that tweet for what he said. The way Don Lemon is approaching this is that Terry Crews is stupid and he doesn't understand reality. That's the way, as though Don Lemon is now woke to the nth degree somehow, when in fact what he was saying 7 years ago was truth. Listen to Terry Crews now.
Die on this hill.
Well, again, I wanted to bring up the fact that, there are some very, very, militant type forces in Black Lives Matter. And what I was issuing was a warning. It's one of those things where I've been a part of different groups, I've been a part of different things, and you see how extremes can really can go far and can go wild. And then when you issue a warning, and when a warning is seen as detrimental to the movement, how can you ever have checks and balances? In the 60s and 70s, airplanes went down all the time. And the reason they found out why they did was because the pilots could never be questioned. And when you have the leaders of the Black Lives Movement who are now talking about, if we don't get our demands, we're going to burn it down. Other black people who are talking about working with other whites and other races, they're being viewed as sellouts or called Uncle Toms. You start to understand that you are now, being controlled. You're not being treated as loved. You're actually being controlled. Someone wants to control the narrative. And I viewed it as a very, very dangerous self-righteousness that was developing that really viewed themselves as better. It was almost a supremacist move.
So I can see, and he just said it. Terry Crews just said it. It's a supremacist move. And I'm telling you, what he is saying is the philosophy that I have lived by for, the majority of my adult life. And it's why I serve. You know, I don't just serve to ensure freedom, but to ensure that people can understand through example of what it takes to sustain freedom. And Terry Crews, when he put that tweet out there, he was warning people that there is something not right about this. And he took it upon himself to do that and use his platform. That is very honorable. And the blowback that he's gotten is righteous. I mean, he is doing he is fighting the good fight, and it's a righteous fight. So as he explains this, Don Lemon, you can tell Don's just waiting to cut in there because he thinks Terry Crews is an idiot. Now, Don Lemon's either a communist himself, which may very well be, or he was brainwashed, which may very well be, or he's beholden to the people that gave him this stage, and so he's going to say what they want him to say, which might be, but I doubt it. But in any case, everything that Terry Crews just said right there is absolutely true, and Don Lemon, thinking that he's woke now, absolutely thinks that Terry Crews is an idiot. Now listen to what Don Lemon has to say.
Where they view that their Black lives mattered a lot more than mine.
Okay, so let me jump in here.
So he didn't say anything like I just said, like, it's true about the supremacy and the, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And then when you look at people who instantly jump on a racial bandwagon, it doesn't matter if it's white or black. If they start judging other people, it's a dangerous, controlling thing. Listen to Don Lemon.
There's a lot that you said. You think Black Lives Matter is, you said you think it's an extreme movement? Because it's now part of the...
No, this is the thing. It's a great mantra. It's a true mantra. Black lives do matter. But when you're talking about an organization, you're talking about the leaders. You're talking about the people who are responsible for putting these things together. I got you.
So let me,
but different things.
Terry, you realize that even during the civil rights movement that Dr. King was seen as extreme. That movement was seen as extreme.
So Don Lemon is equating Martin Luther King to the communist, the admitted communist. One of the leaders in Toronto, I believe it was, this female said that that white people are subhuman, that they are below black people on the evolutionary chain, very similar to the way Japanese felt about everybody else back before World War II. And you've seen this. Hitler felt the same way. It's very interesting how Don Lemon completely overlooks that, of course, because he buys into it and equates Martin Luther King's struggle, which was from real oppression, and was action through peace, true peaceful protests. There's no equating that. This is a complete bullshit statement by Don Lemon. But he doesn't see it. He doesn't see it that way.
To people who don't want to make change, movements are seen as extreme. You can paint them easily as an extreme when they are not.
This is very true, but also when you're talking about MLK, you're talking about Nelson Mandela, and even Malcolm X, they all realized that you had to have a non-racial component to these kind of movements, or there will be resentment. There will be get back. There will be, one of these people will tend to, listen, I don't want to move from one oppressor to the next.
I mean, the reality is we could almost end that right here, because that is probably one of the most profound things I've heard from anyone during this entire thing that is happening, is that you don't want to move from one oppressor to the next, but yet look at what's happening. People are just being oppressed left and right. Some, black people like Terry Crews, who goes against what Black Lives Matter really is, he gets vilified. Teachers who are conservative, they get vilified. You say something outside of that narrative, like I said before, outside the narrative of the collective, and you will be vilified. So you're moving from we moved from one oppressor a long time ago, and you don't want to move now to the communist mindset of oppression. it's not going to be good for anybody. So it's not like we, one thing, I'm not saying I disagree with Terry, but it's not like we just moved from one oppressor to the other. We've literally had 70 years where things have gotten progressively better, and to the point where, I mean, it's really more than 70 years, but really since the 60s, it's gotten to a point where, you know, if you want to be something in this nation, no matter who you are, where you came from, what your skin color is, no matter what, you can be, you know, amazing in this country. And so we left the oppression back there, and then we've progressed from there, but now it's totally turned around. Let's finish this, and then we'll take a break, and then I'm going to come back and talk about the cancel culture. But let's listen to this.
And one thing is really
who's the next oppressor? Who's the next oppressor?
Oh, when I describe this, when you look in the city of Chicago, there are 9 children who died by gun violence, by black on black gun violence, from June 20th all the way to today. And you're talking about, even with the Atlanta child murders, there were 28 kids who died in 2 years. You're talking about a month, and you have 9 black kids, and the Black Lives Matter movement has said nothing about this.
What does that have to do with equality, though, Terry? I don't understand what that has to do with equality.
This is unbelievable. When you listen, I'm going to play a little bit of the clip from before what Don Lemon said 7 years ago. I mean, listen to what he's saying. I'm going to play this part again, what he's saying from 7 years ago.
Because black people, if you really want to fix the problem, here's just 5 things that you should think about doing. Here's number 5, pull up your pants.
I mean, he's saying pull your pants up, which he would say now, if somebody said that, he would flip and say, that's a racist thing. That's part of the problem. You can't tell people how to dress or what to do. He would be flipping out. If Terry Crews had said that, or anybody for that matter, had come on and said, I don't think you should be telling people to pull their pants up, Don Lemon, he would have flipped out 7 years ago.
Number 4 now is the N-word. Now number 3, respect where you live. Start small by not dropping trash, littering in your...
He's saying that these things are the reason, right? Remember, the reason this whole thing started, this interview, was because Bill O'Reilly was talking about how the denigration of the inner city and the black community. And
communities. I've lived in several.
And now he's saying that it is caused back then 7 years ago. He's saying that the problem, he didn't mention police in here anywhere. He's not mentioning them at all. He's basically saying that people in the black community are responsible. They're responsible for the problem. Here's the other part of it.
Predominantly white neighborhoods in my life, I rarely, if ever, witness people littering. I live in Harlem now. It's an historically black neighborhood. Every single day I see adults and children dropping their trash on the ground when a garbage can is just feet away. Just being honest here. Number 2, finish school. You want to break the cycle of poverty? Stop telling kids they're acting white because they go to school or they speak proper English. Over the course of a career, a college grad will make nearly $1 million more than a high school graduate. That's a lot of money. And number 1, and probably the most important, just because you can have a baby, it doesn't mean you should.
That is phenomenal. That is phenomenal when you're putting in, I haven't done this. I mean, I knew when I listened to these 2 videos, but when you listen to what Don Lemon is saying now, it's phenomenal that he is saying the things the way that he does. Let's do it. This is from the interview that happened 2 days ago.
Though, Terry, I don't understand what that has to do with equality, because listen, there's crime. There are people in those communities those people aren't just being nonchalant about gun violence. I lived in Chicago. There are many people who are working in those communities to try to get rid of the gun violence. The gun culture in this country is prevalent, but I don't understand what that has to do with a movement that's for equality for black people.
This is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Anyway, we'll just leave it. We'll leave it there as far as that goes. But that is exactly, I don't know what's happened to this guy in 7 years, but it's pretty shocking. And it shows you that somebody who's truly woke, if you want to use that terminology, will say things like Don Lemon did 7 years ago. That's called critical thinking, or like Terry Crews does now, because Terry Crews is part of the collection of free people, not a collective of leftists. Let's take a break. We're going to come back, and I just want to touch real quick on how this leftist movement is actually, and this is typical of communism, it is having a profound effect on the ability of liberals themselves to flourish in their career fields. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. How many of you out there have a concealed weapons carry permit? And how many of you with those permits have ever thought about where you would have to use that weapon, when you would have to draw it and defend yourself against an imminent threat of loss of life or serious bodily injury? Well, if you haven't considered that and actually trained for it in your mind, you're not qualified to be carrying that weapon. You see, in the SEAL teams and in law enforcement, all these different avenues in which I've served, that is one of the main things that we go over again and again. Where would you have to use it, and what are your rules of engagement before you actually use it? What has to happen? Now, you don't have to be a concealed weapons carry permitted person. You could just be somebody who has a family. You could be somebody who is single and lives in a high-rise in one of these cities where just it's going crazy right now. The fact is, if you have not realized that you can make educated predictions of who would attack you, why they would attack you, where and when it would happen, and how it would be carried out, you need to realize that that can actually occur. You can actually forward think these things, but you have to have a skill set. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival is a book, a best-selling book that I wrote that teaches you how attackers look at you, and it shows you how to use that knowledge to target yourself in every aspect of your life, and then turn around and build better defenses based on awareness of who, why, where, when, and how you would be attacked. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. I've got 2 workbooks that go with it. Go check them out, folks. I'm telling you right now, this is not just a commercial. This is an offer for you to get the best type of awareness and training that you could possibly have. It's available anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's out there. Order it. Go get it. Give me your feedback. And if you have questions, you can always reach me on social media, and I'll answer those questions for you. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. And let's get back to the show. Okay, so I'm still reeling over the Don Lemon thing, but you know what's interesting is that this cancel culture, which the leftists have done, which I was explaining earlier, where you know the oppressor is now it's these people that are functioning in the collective to shut everybody else down, to shut down what everybody else has to say, or the type of ideas that other people may have or ideologies. They're going to shut that down. And so this online publication called Vox, which this is the way they describe themselves, a general interest news site for the 21st century. Its mission is simple: explain the news, politics, public policy, world affairs, pop culture, science, business, etc., etc. But what they should say is explain the news from a liberal perspective, because different employees from Vox got into a big heated debate because, I don't know, it's like 150 people, mostly liberals, wrote an open letter. You know how these celebrities and liberals always do that. They wrote an open letter to about this cancel culture, because they're all being affected by it. Writers are tremendously being affected by it. People like the writer for the Harry Potter series, and then also people from the different Broadway plays and things like that. And so they all got on there and wrote this about the dangers of the cancel culture. But the funny thing is that they're the ones who have created it. They've taken part of it in it, and they will take part in it as long as it doesn't affect them. And this is exactly to a T what happens to people in a communist community. They use these people. I've said this over and over, and history shows this. They allow the activists to do their thing. And then once the movement of communism starts to take hold in a nation or in a location, they will then, it eats itself, and to the point where it ruins all those people, so that the real power players don't have to mess with their loud mouths. And that's what's occurring, is that they are being consumed by the process in which a nation becomes communist. Remember, it is out of conflict, a synthesis happens, and this utopia of a location without, or a community without government, is formed. And remember, in order for that it would never happen, it will never happen, is because the only people that would come up with this stupid idea are leftists and not ungodly people. And so they're the ones who will eat themselves, and power hungry people that are, narcissists or psychopaths, they're the ones who push this type of thinking. So what you're seeing is that they, in the process of becoming communists, is actually rapidly consuming them already, because they have to do this process of the cancel culture and the intimidation and the violence for political aim. What does that sound like? Terrorism. That's the actual definition of terrorism. But they are becoming victims of it. And it's actually happening quite rapidly, probably faster than it has in previous places in history. I just find that very interesting. And I think you should keep abreast of that and watch, because I think what you're going to see is that this is going to become potentially the kryptonite for these leftists in this country. Because remember, we're still in a free country as of now. There's still a constitution as of now. And this is where the real battle is going to start, is because I don't think that people on the right, unless something gets really bad, are going to organize. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope I can convince people to start organizing better than they are. But the one thing that could possibly happen is that leftists that are liberal but not to the point where they're activists will just end up throwing up their hands and saying, F these people, this has to stop. And then they will have their own little civil war, basically. That would be a great thing if that actually happens. I don't know if that's actually happened in history. It'd be great to talk to a historian, but I could definitely see that occurring. Now, I wanted to play, before I go here and get some rest, is that I saw a video of Laura Ingraham, and the professor from Stony Brook University that predicted that President Trump would win in 2016. He was predicting that before Trump was even picked as the candidate or won the nomination for the Republican presidential candidate. So this guy is now predicting that he will win again by a landslide. But I'm going to play that soundbite from that professor, Helmut Norpoth, I think is how you say his name. He's from Stony Brook University. But first, from MSNBC, this is perfect counterpoint type of soundbite like I played with Don Lemon. What you're going to hear is James Carville. And this guy is such a weirdo. He's such a weirdo. And you're going to listen to what he has to say. And he's a political wonk. Remember, he's a far leftist, just a nasty, evil person. And when you look at him, he looks like a nasty, evil person. And he is as far left of a politician as you could possibly go. So let's listen to this from MSNBC yesterday.
Ellie, good to see you. I see you're still basking in that national championship, and if things keep going the way they are, we don't get a season, you might be national champs for 2 years here down there in Baton Rouge.
Release the bar so we could be national champions for 2 years.
So, yeah, and that's a hilarious joke that he just told there, that if somebody could release the virus, maybe they'll be national champions for 2 years. If that would have been somebody from the right making that joke, I can guarantee you, as much as they're like freaking out on the leftist media trying to make the virus into something more than it is, they would go crazy over that soundbite right there when he said that. But whatever, he's an idiot.
Well, you might hold on to that title for a while. So we haven't talked to you in a while, James. So I'm interested in your view of where things are right now. For Joe Biden, for Donald Trump, Joe Biden has consistently now showed double-digit leads nationally. He's leading in most of the battleground states. You've got Republican senators, incumbents on the run, trying to hold on to their seats. Wrong track numbers, staggering. 75% of Americans say we're on the wrong track. Coronavirus on fire in states across the country.
Okay, before I even get to James Carville, everything that guy just said, those are BS statistics. But the thing that stood out for me is that I caught some flack from somebody because I, on Twitter, had said that before the president's rally in Oklahoma, I said that it would not surprise me if somebody from the left went around that rally and was spreading the virus. And, of course, the left doesn't like to hear people say stuff like that. But I find it very peculiar that the virus has sprung up in places where the president is popular. And they are saying, I read this on Drudge, one of these leftist publications that they use, it's an aggregate, Drudges, so they take all the different leftists, basically all leftists, online publications, and then you click on there and you go to theirs. But anyway, it said that the churches are actually the hot spot where this virus is spreading. Now, I find that very odd because there's a lot of people that are not going to church. Churches are not open on a grand scale across the country. And by and large, they are social distancing, at least when they go there. But nothing is being said about protests. Nothing is being said about that at all. And quite frankly, we don't even know what the statistics are about the protests. I find that very, very interesting. I would love to see if there's no way we can actually get true statistics because they're all skewed. But how somehow magically the protests all around this country and the riots didn't cause any type of amplification of this virus at all. So you're saying that everybody that protested and rioted and sweated all over each other and screamed. In fact, they're trying to make it mandatory in some states where you can't sing in church because of they're saying it would spread the virus. They didn't say anything about people yelling and screaming in these protests where hundreds of thousands of people in certain circumstances were at. And the other thing that shocks me is that there's 100,000 people that are buying into this nonsense. So, and by nonsense, I mean the communist movement of Black Lives Matter. But let's go on and listen to what James Carville now has to say.
That we've seen in the streets right now, and yet you have Democrats, I think probably because they felt burned by 2016, saying, hey, we still got 4 months till Election Day. I'm not counting any chickens yet. Where do you think this presidential race is right now as a man who's run a couple of them?
Well, I agree with Justice Scarborough, and I agree with the first two people who say that. I think there's a significant chance he doesn't run. I mean, this thing is going so poorly.
He is saying... This weirdo is saying that he thinks the president won't even run, as though President Trump is just going to drop out and tuck tail and go away based on the polls that the leftist media are issuing. And I throw Fox News in there as well. They're the people who run the polls at Fox are just as far left, and they're just as skewed. This guy's nuts.
So far back, it doesn't even, to me, it doesn't make much sense for him to run. This is the great Moscow Mitch strategy. After Labor Day, we're going to turn on him. That's really going to work. I mean, McSally and Ernst and Sullivan and Lindsey been licking his boots for 3 years and 9 months. But boy, come Labor Day, we're going to get some separation. The chances of that working are zero. He is going to drag the whole outfit down with him. Bill and his group, Bulwark, they're spending tens of millions of dollars. And
what are you talking about? So first of all, they are reaching so hard. And now listen, I'm not trying to warn people away and say that the president may not win in November. I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. Mail-in ballots, the corruption of that alone could skew the election. You got idiots that are popping up all over the place saying that they're going to run for president. I don't know if Kanye is true about that or not, but he could cause major problems. You remember, like, when these other people run, in some cases, if they take away 1,000 votes in one area, that could really be a problem if it's a close race. But the way these people are thinking, or at least the narrative that they're pushing forward, is that this president has no chance whatsoever based on polls. It's all based on polls, not based on anything else except for polls. He goes on to say, I won't even play it. He goes on to say how they're and he's bragging, and they had Bill Kristol, who's another moron, bragging about all the money that they're spending to get people to turn on Trump. You would think that people would want a great leader in their country that just is willing to lead and willing to work. It's not like the country before March was like soaring. Okay, now I'm going to play the audio from this professor that actually predicted what was going to happen with Trump before anybody else did. And he was not looking at the polls. He looks at facts and figures and different indicators, and that's how he comes up with his truthful analysis. Okay, so here we go. Here's Laura Ingraham, who is actually a very bright person and has done a lot behind, not just in media. But here's Helmut Norpoth.
Helmut Norpoth, political science professor at Stony Brook University, joins me now. Professor, thank you for being with us tonight. You say Trump's chances are over 90%. Now, what data are you looking at to make that call?
So this is the guy that's looking at data, real data, not polls, and he's saying 90%. And he's the guy who predicted a landslide in 2016.
Well, that's right. Okay, the key to the November election is the primaries, and really the early primaries are already giving us a lot of information, and based on that, Donald Trump won them very easily in his party. Joe Biden, the likely nominee for the Democrats, had a great deal of trouble, pulled it together, but on balance, it's that stronger performance in primaries that gives Donald Trump the edge in November.
So you see, Helmut is looking at performance, not polls. See, that's the biggest difference when you look at these commentators on the left and people like this professor, is that he looks at performance. They look at the polls that they themselves created. It's just like the cancel culture and all the liberals going crazy because they're the ones getting canceled. This is why they fail. This is why I don't believe in this left and right. So I mean, it exists, but I don't believe that you're never going to fix anything based on whether you're left or right. You can't, as I always say, change a light bulb based on an ideology. You have to figure out what the best light bulb is that you can replace it with, and then figure out if you need a ladder or if you need a stool, and then you get up there and you unscrew it and you change it. There's no ideology involved. It takes a light bulb, it takes electricity, and you have to get a replacement, and you have to get a way to get up there and put it in there. That's it. And it's the same. That's what this professor is looking at. He's looking at performance, and how they debated, and performance and how they know things and how they keep themselves together, and how people reacted to them. We'll listen to a few more seconds of him.
Certainly doesn't take into account a global pandemic, I would imagine, although 100 years old, I guess it's been, that must have missed the 1918 pandemic. But does that have any impact in your view?
Well, it could. I mean, I can't rule that out. But what I see at the moment is that where I would expect the pandemic to have an effect would be on the approval rating of the president. And I don't see any dent in Trump's approval rating. In fact, I mean, in the early goings, he got a little uptick. And unless his approval rating collapses, I don't think that this would have much bearing on my forecast.
There you go. Thank you, Helmet. Love that name. So very, very interesting stuff. It just goes on and on, folks, with the left and the way that they do these things, the way that they come up with their own crap and then they eat their own crap sandwich. It's unbelievable the way that this works. But listen, I'm going to call it there. Now, what I want you all to focus on is I want you to think about this whole concept of the collective and how they create the narrative. And if the collection of free people don't see eye to eye with that narrative, and they probably won't because it's a made-up narrative for the purpose of control, they are going to be pushed out. They're going to be ousted. They're going to be vilified, and they're going to be injured. And that's what's happening. Now, the way that you counter that is through action of the collection. And that's where the real focus has to be. But that's where the danger lies, because a collection of free people have to decide to work together. Whereas the collective, they just do what they're told. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and we're out of here.